Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God, back with you with the next video in our series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. After dinner, the children were introduced, and Mrs. Coiler made admiring comments on their eyes, noses, and legs, a sagacious way of improving their minds. There were 4 little girls and 2 little boys, besides the baby, who might have been either, and the baby's next successor, who was as yet neither. They were brought in by Flopson and Millers, much as those 2 non-commissioned officers had been recruiting somewhere for children and had enlisted these, while Mrs. Pocket looked at the young nobles that ought to have been, as if she rather thought she had the pleasure of inspecting them before, but didn't quite know what to make of them. "Here, give me your fork, Mum, and take the baby," said Flopson. "Don't take it that way, or you'll get its head under the table." Thus advised, Mrs. Pocket took it the other way, and got its head upon the table, which was announced to all present by a prodigious concussion. "Dear, dear, give it me back, Mum," said Flopson. "And Miss Jane, come and dance, too, baby, do." One of the little girls, a mere mite, who seemed to have prematurely taken up upon herself some charge of the others, stepped out of her place by me, and danced to and from the baby until it left off crying, and laughed. Then all the children laughed, and Mr. Pocket, who in the meantime had twice endeavored to lift himself up by the hair, laughed, and we all laughed, and were glad. Flopson, by dint of doubling the baby at the joints like a Dutch doll, then got it safely into Mrs. Pocket's lap, and gave it the nutcrackers to play with, at the same time recommending Mrs. Pocket to take notice that the handles of that instrument were not likely to agree with its eyes, and sharply charging Miss Jane to look after the same. Then the 2 nurses left the room, and had a lively scuffle on the staircase, and with the dissipated page who had waited at dinner, and who had clearly lost half his buttons at the gaming table. I was made very uneasy in my mind by Mrs. Pocket's falling into a discussion with Drummle respecting 2 baronetcies, while she ate a sliced orange steeped in sugar and wine, and forgetting all about the baby on her lap, who did most appalling things with the nutcrackers. At length little Jane, perceiving its young brains to be imperilled, softly left her place, and with many small artifices coaxed the dangerous weapons away. Mrs. Pocket, finishing her orange at about the same time, and not approving of this, said to Jane, "You naughty child, how dare you? Go and sit down this instant." "Mamma, dear," lisped the little girl, "baby 'ud have put his eyes out." "How dare you tell me so?" retorted Miss Pocket. "Go and sit down in your chair this moment." Mrs. Pocket's dignity was so crushing that I felt quite abashed, as if I myself had done something to rouse it. "Belinda," remonstrated Mr. Pocket from the other end of the table, "how can you be so unreasonable? Jane only interfered for the protection of a baby." "I will not allow anybody to interfere," said Mrs. Pocket. "I am surprised, Matthew, that you should expose me to the affront of interference." "Good God!" cried Mr. Pocket, in an outbreak of desolate desperation. "Are infants to be nutcrackered into their tombs, and is nobody to save them?" "I will not be interfered with by Jane," said Mrs. Pocket, with a majestic glance at that innocent little offender. "I hope I know my poor grandpapa's position. Jane, indeed!" Mr. Pocket got his hands in his hair again, and this time really did lift himself some inches out of this chair. "Hear this!" he helplessly exclaimed to the elements. "Babies are to be nutcrackered dead, for people's poor grandpapa's positions." Then he let himself down again and became silent. We all looked awkwardly at the tablecloth while this was going on. A pause succeeded, during which the honest and irrepressible baby made a series of leaps and crows at little Jane, who appeared to me to be the only member of the family, irrespective of servants, with whom it had any decided acquaintance. "Mr. Drummle," said Mrs. Pocket, "will you ring for Flopson? Jane, You undutiful little thing, go and lie down. Now, baby darling, come with Ma. The baby was the soul of honor, and protested with all its might. It doubled itself up the wrong way over Mrs. Pocket's arm, exhibited a pair of knitted shoes and dimpled ankles to the company in lieu of its soft face, and was carried out in the highest state of mutiny. And it gained its point after all, for I saw it through the window within a few minutes, being nursed by little Jane. It happened that the other 5 children were left behind at the dinner table, through Flopson's having some private engagement, and there not being anybody else's business. I thus became aware of the mutual relations between them and Mr. Pocket, which we were exemplified in the following manner. Mr. Pocket, with the normal perplexity of his face heightened and his hair rumpled, looked at them for some minutes as if he couldn't make out how they came to be boarding and lodging in that establishment, and why they hadn't been billeted by nature on someone else. Then, in a distant, missionary way, he asked them certain questions, as why little Joe had that hole in his frill, who said, Pa, Flopson was going to mend it when she had time, and how little Fanny came by that Whitlow, who said, Pa, Millers was going to poultice it when she didn't forget. Then he melted into paternal tenderness, and gave them a shilling apiece, and told them to go and play. And then as they went out, with one very strong effort to lift himself up by the hair, he dismissed the hopeless subject. In the evening there was a rowing on the river. As Drummale and Startup had each a boat, I resolved to set up mine and to cut them both out. I was pretty good at most exercises in which country boys are adepts, but as I was conscious of wanting elegance of style for the Thames, not to say for other waters, I at once engaged to place myself under the tuition of the winner of a prize wherry, who plied at our stairs, and to whom I was introduced by my new allies. This practical authority confused me very much by saying I had the arm of a blacksmith. If he could have known how nearly the compliment lost him his pupil, I doubt he would have paid it. There was a supper tray after we got home at night, and I think we should have all enjoyed ourselves, but for a rather disagreeable domestic occurrence. Mr. Pocket was in good spirits when a housemaid came in and said, "If you please, sir, I should wish to speak to you." "Speak to your master," said Mrs. Pocket, whose dignity was roused again. "How can you think of such a thing? Go and speak to Flopson, or speak to me at some other time." "Begging your pardon, ma'am," returned the housemaid, "I should wish to speak at once and speak to master." Hereupon Mr. Pocket went out of the room, and we made the best of ourselves until he came back. "This is a pretty thing, Belinda," said Mr. Pocket, returning with a countenance expressive of grief and despair. "Here's the cook lying insensibly drunk on the kitchen floor, with a large bundle of fresh butter made up in the cardboard, ready to sell for grease." Mrs. Pocket instantly showed much amiable emotion, and said, "This is that odious Sophia's doing." "What do you mean, Belinda?" demanded Mr. Pocket. "Sophia has told you," said Mr. Pocket. "Did I not see her with my own eyes, and hear her with my own ears, come into the room just now and ask to speak to you?" "But she has not taken me downstairs. But she has not taken me downstairs, Belinda," returned Mr. Pocket, "and shown me the woman, and the bundle too." "And do you defend her, Matthew," said Mrs. Pocket, "for making mischief?" Mr. Pocket uttered a dismal groan. "Am I grandpapa's granddaughter, to be nothing in the house?" said Mrs. Pocket. "Besides, the cook has always been a very nice, respectful woman, and said in the most natural manner, when she came to look after the situation, that she felt I was born to be a duchess." There was a sofa where Mr. Pocket stood, and he dropped upon it in the attitude of the dying gladiator. Still in that attitude, he said, with a hollow voice, "Good night, Mr. Pip," when I deemed it advisable to go to bed and leave him. We just finished chapter 23, so we'll stop for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.